The first time Eleanor Van Derlen saw the prenuptial agreement, she had laughed a bright, champagne-fueled sound that echoed through the penthouse suite of the Waldorf Astoria, where her fiancé, Alexander Remington IV, had just slid the document across the table with the same casual grace he used to order vintage Bordeaux or dismiss boardroom dissenters. "It's just a formality," he had said, his voice smooth, his smile practiced. "All the old money families do it. Think of it as insurance." And Eleanor, young and dazzled by the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, had signed without reading past the third clause, her pen scratching out loops of ink that would one day become shackles. That was 7 years ago. Now, standing in the cavernous marble foyer of their Fifth Avenue triplex, the same document lay between them like a live grenade, its clauses no longer fine print but landmines. Alexander's lawyer, a razor-sharp man in a 10,000 suit, had just finished outlining the terms, each word a calculated blow: infidelity, forfeiture, moral turpitude, asset reversion. The Remington family fortune, built on railroads and ruthless backroom deals, was locked down tighter than Fort Knox, and Eleanor, once the darling of New York society, was about to be left with nothing. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice low, fingers tightening around the edge of the glass coffee table. After everything you've done," Alexander cut in, his voice icy. He didn't need to say it aloud. The tabloids had already done the work for him: socialite's secret affair with tech billionaire. Scandal rocks Remington empire. The photos, grainy but damning, had been leaked the night of the Met Gala, and by dawn, every financier, gossip columnist, and society vulture had dissected them. But Eleanor knew the truth. The prenup wasn't about infidelity. It was about the other clause, the one buried on page 37, the one that mentioned the Van Derlen Trust and the offshore accounts her grandfather had siphoned from Remington Steel in the 1980s. Alexander had known. He'd always known. And now, with divorce looming, he was going to use it to destroy her. Across the room, the Remington family portrait, oil-painted, imperious, watched them like a jury. Alexander's father, the late Charles Remington II, had once told her, "Nothing in this family is accidental, my dear. Not even love." He was right. The war had begun. The ink had dried on the prenup 7 years ago, but the poison in its clauses was only now seeping into Eleanor's veins. She had been naive, dazzled by the whirlwind courtship, private jets to Monaco, diamonds that weighed down her wrists like promises, Alexander's cool blue eyes watching her with something that felt like possession long before it curdled into control. She should have known. The Remingtons didn't marry for love, they married for strategy, and Eleanor, her family's name still whispered in certain circles with a mix of reverence and revulsion, had been the perfect pawn. Now, the game was over. The penthouse was too quiet, the kind of silence that came before a storm. Outside, Manhattan glittered, indifferent. Inside, Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, his reflection a ghost in the glass. "You signed it, Ellie," he said, voice detached, as if discussing a stock portfolio instead of the wreckage of their marriage. "You didn't ask questions. That's on you." A sharp laugh escaped her. "You mean you counted on me not asking questions?" She reached into her Birkin, the buttery leather a stark contrast to the weapon. She pulled out a single USB drive, innocuous, deadly. Funny thing about prenups. They're only unbreakable if both parties walk in clean. For the first time that evening, Alexander turned. His expression didn't change, but she saw it: the flicker in his pupils, the slight tightening of his jaw. "What's that?" "The real clause," she said, tossing the drive onto the glass table between them. It clattered like a bullet casing. "The one your father added after you left the room. The one that says if any Remington is convicted of financial crimes during the marriage, the entire agreement voids. And guess what, Alex, I found the books. The real ones. The ones your CFO's been hiding in the Caymans." The air thickened. Somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged. A dog barked on the street below. Normal sounds, surreal now. Alexander didn't move. "You're bluffing." Eleanor smiled, slow and sharp. "Am I?" She didn't blink. "Your brother's been sloppy. All those consulting fees to shell companies, the offshore transfers the week before the SEC audit. I wonder what the Times would do with that." A muscle twitched in his temple. "You wouldn't try me." For a heartbeat, they were frozen, two predators circling. Then Alexander did something unexpected. He laughed. It wasn't he warm. It was the sound of a man who just realized the chessboard had been flipped. You've changed, Ellie. No, she said softly. I just finally woke up. The USB sat between them, a tiny, ticking bomb. And then the doorbell rang. The doorbell's chime sliced through the tension like a scalpel. Eleanor didn't move. Alexander didn't either. They stayed locked in their silent standoff, the USB drive between them pulsing like a live wire. Then, with deliberate slowness, Alexander turned toward the foyer, his polished Oxfords clicking against the marble. Expecting someone, he asked, voice dripping with false calm. Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears. She hadn't called anyone. But in this game, allies and enemies moved in the shadows, and she learned not to trust coincidences. Alexander opened the door. Damian Cole stood there, his tech billionaire smirk in place, a manila envelope tucked under one arm. His gaze flicked past Alexander, landing on Eleanor with a familiarity that made Alexander's knuckles whiten around the door frame. Evening, folks, Damian drawled. Hope I'm not interrupting. Or actually, scratch that. I hope I am. Alexander's voice was lethally quiet. Get out. Damian sighed, as if dealing with a petulant child. See, that's the problem with you Remingtons. Always jumping to conclusions. He held up the envelope. This isn't about her. It's about you. Eleanor's breath caught. She knew that look in Damian's eyes, the one that said he'd just cracked open a vault everyone else thought was impenetrable. Alexander didn't take the bait. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. Damian's grin widened. Not even your brother's stake in Remington Aerospace. Silence. Eleanor watched Alexander's face, the micro twitch of his eyelid, the almost imperceptible tightening along his jaw. Christian Remington's shares were the family's best-kept secret, the reason Alexander's father had written that clause into the prenup in the first place. If Christian's gambling debts ever forced a sale, control of the company would splinter. And Damian Cole, with his bottomless pockets and grudge against old money, was the last person who should have that information. Alexander stepped aside, his voice a razor wrapped in silk. Come in, then. Let us hear your terms. Damian sauntered past him, tossing the envelope onto the table next to Eleanor's USB. Oh, I don't want money, Alex. I want answers. He pulled out a photo, grainy, surveillance style of Christian Remington in a backroom poker game, chips piled high, a gun on the table. Like why your baby brother was playing high stakes with Lucien Varga the night before the SEC started sniffing around your hedge fund. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Varga. The name was a grenade in the city, a shadowy financier with ties to Eastern European syndicates. If Christian had been stupid enough to sit at that table. Alexander's mask slipped for half a second, raw fury flashing beneath. Then it was gone. Photoshop is a hell of a thing. Damian chuckled. And yet, the metadata doesn't lie. He tapped the envelope. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Christian's just a degenerate with terrible friends. Or maybe his gaze slid to Eleanor. Someone's setting him up to take the fall for something much, much bigger. The air left the room. Eleanor's mind raced. This wasn't just about the prenup anymore. This was about who would burn first, Christian, Alexander, or her. Then her phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. Check the safe. You'll want to see what's inside before he does. The safe was hidden behind a Klimt reproduction in the library, a touch so pretentious Eleanor almost laughed when she first discovered it. Now, her fingers trembled as she spun the dial. 22-15-9, Alexander's birthday, because of course it was. The door clicked open. Inside, a velvet box of her grandmother's emeralds never worn, a stack of bearer bonds untouched, and a slim digital recorder that hadn't been there last week. Eleanor hit play. A woman's voice, crisp with old money disdain, filled the room. You'll take care of it, Charles. Like you did with the Van Derlen girl. Her blood turned to ice. Van Derlen girl. A man's rumble. Alexander's father, Charles Remington too, that was different. She was asking questions. This is just a payoff. And if she refuses? A pause. Then, so quiet Eleanor had to strain to hear, then we'll do what we always do. Make it look like an accident. The recording cut off. Eleanor's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the desk, the wood biting into her palms. The Van Derlen girl. There had only been one, her Aunt Isabel, who drowned in the family pool when Eleanor was 6. A tragic slip, they said. A terrible accident. The library door creaked open. Alexander stood there, his face unreadable. Find what you were looking for. She didn't bother lying. Did you know? He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Know what? That your father murdered my aunt. A beat. Then, chillingly calm, I suspected. The admission was worse than a denial. Eleanor's vision tunneled. You married me anyway. Power isn't just about money, Ellie. It's about leverage. His smile was a knife. And you've always been the perfect leverage. Outside, a car backfired, or was it a gunshot? In this world, the line was blurry. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Lucian Varga owns Christian's debts. He wants Remington Aerospace. And he'll trade you the proof of Isabel's murder for it. Alexander's gaze dropped to her screen. He went very still. Then, from the foyer, Damien's voice, laced with mock concern, kids, you might want to see this. On the security monitor, a black town car idled at the curb. The back window rolled down just enough to reveal a pale hand, a glint of a signet ring Varga's crest. The game had just gotten bigger. And the only way out was through fire. The black town car's door swung open, but it wasn't Lucian Varga who emerged. A polished Oxford crunched on the pavement first, followed by the razor-sharp crease of a Brioni suit. Then the face, one Eleanor hadn't seen in 12 years, not since the Van Derlen Trust disappeared along with her brother. Hello, little sister. Nathaniel Van Derlen stood on the penthouse doorstep looking like vengeance personified, his once boyish features hardened into angles that matched the family portrait Eleanor kept hidden in her closet. The same portrait where their father's eyes seemed to follow you across the room. Alexander made a sound low in his throat. Christ. The prodigal son returns. Nathaniel ignored him, his gaze locking onto Eleanor. You look good for someone standing in the kill zone. He held up a burner phone displaying a single line of text. They killed Dad too. The foyer tiles turned to quicksand beneath Eleanor's feet. She'd been 9 when her father's private plane went down in the Caribbean. An instrument failure, the NTSB ruled. Damien Cole chose that moment to saunter into the hallway, whiskey glass in hand. Well, this just became the most expensive family reunion in history. His smirk faded when Nathaniel turned that glacial Van Derlen stare on him. Cole. Nathaniel's voice could have flash frozen the Hudson. Still playing both sides? Only when the sides are this interesting. Alexander moved suddenly, blocking Nathaniel's path. You've got 5 seconds to state your business before security drags you out. Nathaniel didn't blink. 3 things. 1. Lucian Varga owns Christian's markers to the tune of $87 million. 2. The SEC has a mole inside Remington Capital feeding them everything. And 3. He reached into his jacket. Alexander tensed. Mom's alive. The grainy surveillance photo hit the marble floor with a slap. A silver-haired woman sat at a cafe in Zurich, unmistakably Lillian Van Derlen despite the decades. The date stamp, yesterday. Eleanor's knees gave out. She caught herself on the console table, sending a Ming vase shattering to the floor. The sound seemed to wake something feral in Alexander. You're lying. He grabbed Nathaniel's lapels. Lillian Van Derlen died in. Did she? Nathaniel peeled Alexander's fingers off one by one. Or did she run when she realized what the Remingtons do to inconvenient wives? The grandfather clock in the library chose that moment to chime midnight, its hollow gongs vibrating through the penthouse like a countdown. Somewhere in the building, an alarm began to wail. The alarm's shriek split the air just as Nathaniel's phone lit up with an encrypted alert. He didn't flinch at the sound, just swiped to reveal a live security feed showing black SUVs swarming the building's service entrance. Varga's men, he said, matter of fact. They'll be in the elevator in 90 seconds. Alexander was already moving, yanking open a concealed wall panel to reveal a biometric safe. Damien, the terrace. Jam their signals. Damien raised an eyebrow but pulled out a slim device from his pocket. You're welcome. Eleanor couldn't tear her eyes from the photo of her mother. Alive. After 22 years of graveside visits and forced smiles at memorial galas. Her fingers trembled as she traced the image. Why now? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Because the trust was never missing. She's been moving it this whole time piece by piece. And someone finally noticed. A deafening crack echoed through the penthouse as the power cut out. Emergency lights bathed the room in blood-red glow. Alexander emerged from the safe with a 6-hour and a single flash drive. This is what they're really after. He tossed it to Eleanor. Your wedding present. She caught it on instinct, the metal warm from his grip. What, every Remington secret since 1946? His smile was all teeth. Including who really sabotaged your father's plane. The elevator ding sounded impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Damien materialized at Eleanor's side, voice low. Back stairwells clear for exactly 4 minutes. After that. He nodded toward Nathaniel. You two vanish. I'll handle cleanup. Nathaniel didn't move. Not without answers. Alexander checked the SIG's magazine. The only answer you need: your mother's been playing chess while you've been playing checkers. He thumbed the safety off. Now get my wife out of here. The elevator doors began to slide open. Eleanor made her choice. She grabbed Nathaniel's arm with one hand and Alexander's tie with the other. No. We finish this tonight. The flash drive bit into her palm. All of us. First muzzle flash lit the foyer like lightning. The war had reached their doorstep. The first bullet shattered a Warhol as Eleanor dragged Alexander behind the steel-reinforced wet bar. Nathaniel moved like shadow, disarming the lead mercenary with a brutal elbow strike before vanishing down the service hallway. Goddamn Van Derlin theatrics, Alexander spat, racking the SIG slide. He pressed the flash drive back into Eleanor's hand. 32-digit password. Your birthday reversed, plus the coordinates to where we first met. Eleanor's breath caught. The Hamptons Beach House. The night of the summer gala. The way he'd looked at her like she was the only woman in the world before she learned that particular Remington smile was practiced in mirrors. Gunfire chewed through the Italian leather sofa. Damien's voice crackled through their abandoned phones simultaneously, fire escape clear. But there's a twist: your mother's in the building. The world tilted. Eleanor's vision tunneled. Alive. Here. After 22 years. Alexander's grip on her wrist turned bruising. Don't. It's a trap. She wrenched free. You don't get to decide what I... The windows exploded. Not from gunfire. From the deliberate, calculated detonation of a shaped charge 3 floors below. The penthouse groaned as its support beams shuddered. Plaster rained from the ceiling. And through the smoke, flanked by men in tactical gear, walked Lillian Van Derlin. Not the fragile society wife from Eleanor's childhood photos. This woman wore body armor beneath her couture blazer, her silver hair in a ruthless braid. The pistol in her hand didn't waver as she aimed it at Alexander's chest. Hello, daughter. Her voice was whiskey and steel. Shall we discuss how your husband's family murdered your father? Nathaniel materialized behind her, blood streaking his temple. His eyes locked with Eleanor's. The signal. Eleanor palmed the flash drive. The second explosion took out the east wall. The shockwave from the explosion sent Eleanor crashing into the ruins of her 300,000 dining table. Splinters of Brazilian rosewood bit into her palms as she scrambled for cover, the taste of cordite and betrayal thick on her tongue. Lillian hadn't come for a reunion. She'd come for war. Alexander's 6-hour barked 3 times, methodical, precise, dropping 2 of Lillian's mercenaries before the slide locked back on an empty chamber. He didn't flinch as return fire chewed through the wall behind him. Ellie. His voice was raw. The drive was always the end game, Lillian finished, stepping over the wreckage like a queen surveying a conquered kingdom. At her signal, Nathaniel moved to flank Eleanor, his expression unreadable. Did you really think Charles Remington would let his golden boy marry a Van Derlin without contingencies? Eleanor's fingers closed around the flash drive. The coordinates. The birthday. The lie. What's on it? Prove, Lillian said, that your wedding night wasn't just a merger of fortunes. Her smile could have frozen hell. It was a live test of the most sophisticated financial weapon ever created. A cold realization slithered down Eleanor's spine. The prenup's obscure clauses. The quarterly marital audits. Alexander's insistence on controlling her trust funds. They hadn't been protecting assets. They'd been calibrating. Damien chose that moment to reappear, dragging a bound and gagged Lucian Varga through the smoke. "Found our puppet master," he announced, dropping the financier at Lillian's feet. "Turns out someone's been playing both families against each other." Varga's muffled screams barely registered. Eleanor was too focused on the way Alexander's jaw tightened to tell he'd never been able to control. "Oh God. You knew." The words tore from her throat. "You knew they were using our marriage to what?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Test algorithms that could collapse economies, trigger hyperinflation in targeted nations." He stepped closer, heedless of the guns trained on him. "Welcome to the big leagues, Ellie. This was never about money." The flash drive burned in Eleanor's fist. Somewhere below them, the building groaned again. Nathaniel's phone buzzed with an alert. His face went pale. The SEC just froze all Remington and Van Derlen assets. Worldwide. Lillian didn't blink. "Then we're out of time." Eleanor looked at the man she'd married. The mother she'd mourned. The brother she'd thought was dead. And made her choice. She slammed the flash drive into the nearest data port. The system recognized it immediately. A countdown appeared on every still functioning screen in the penthouse. 10 minutes. Alexander's face drained of color. "What did you just do?" Eleanor smiled. "What you trained me to." The final war had begun. The countdown hit 9 minutes and 59 seconds as the penthouse trembled from another explosion below. Screams echoed up the elevator shaft. The Remington Van Derlen war had just gone thermonuclear. Eleanor watched the numbers tick down on the shattered smart glass windows, her reflection fracturing across the digital carnage. 9 minutes until the algorithms in that flash drive tore through offshore accounts like a hurricane through sandcastles. 9 minutes until 3 generations of dirty secrets hit every major financial regulator simultaneously. Alexander lunged for the data port. Nathaniel's bullet stopped him cold. The round punched through Alexander's left shoulder, spinning him into the ruins of their wedding china cabinet. Crystal shards rained down like diamonds. "Sorry, brother," Nathaniel said, gun steady. "But we both know Lillian's the only one walking out of here alive." Eleanor froze. Brother Lillian's laugh was a velvet whip crack. "Oh darling, you didn't think your husband and your long-lost brother were strangers, did you?" She kicked Alexander's Sig Sauer toward Eleanor. "They've been working together since Harvard. This whole tragic reunion orchestrated to get that drive into your hands." The floor dropped out from under Eleanor. 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Alexander coughed blood onto the marble. "Not like this." Damien materialized from the smoke, pressing a detonator into Eleanor's free hand. "Choose fast, princess. That countdown's not just releasing files, it's activating the kill switch on every Remington asset from Dubai to Delaware." His grin was feral. "Including yours." The prenup's final clause burned in Eleanor's memory. Upon dissolution, all commingled assets shall be rendered inert. Inert. Frozen. Destroyed. 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Lillian leveled her pistol at Eleanor's forehead. "The Van Derlen fortune survives. Or no one walks out." Nathaniel's gun shifted to cover Damien. "She's bluffing." Alexander dragged himself upright, blood soaking through his Turnbull and Acer shirt. "Ellie. The password." 6 minutes and 3 seconds. Eleanor looked at the detonator. At the flash drive. At the wreckage of her life. Then she entered the final code. The one Alexander never gave her. The one she'd guessed the night he proposed. Isabel's birthday. The screens went black. Then lit up with a single message: asset purge cancelled. Authorization, Van Derlen Remington Trust. Activating contingency alpha. Lillian's scream of rage was cut off by the steel security shutters slamming down over every exit. The ventilation system hissed as colorless gas flooded the penthouse. Eleanor locked eyes with Alexander as the world faded to gray. His lips formed 3 words before the neurotoxin took him: "You were perfect." The Zurich vault door hissed open, revealing a single safe deposit box. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she entered the code: Isabel's birthday, reversed, and the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside lay 2 items: a faded Polaroid of Alexander and Nathaniel as teenagers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, standing on the dock of the Van Derlen summer estate. And a deed: "To the victor goes the spoils." The handwritten note beneath it read in Alexander's precise script: "You were always the best of us." The deed was for an offshore entity, one that held controlling interest in both Remington Holdings and the Van Derlen Trust. A fail-safe. A checkmate. Eleanor exhaled, the weight of the last 3 months pressing down on her. The world believed Alexander Remington IV had died in that penthouse explosion. Lillian van der Laan had vanished into the wind. Nathaniel's body had never been found. And Damien Cole he sent a single email the day after the purge, "Tell me when you're ready to play again." Now, standing in the sterile bank vault, Eleanor slid the deed into her coat pocket. The game wasn't over. It had just changed players. Outside, snow fell over Zurich. Somewhere beneath the Alps, servers hummed, algorithms ticked, and the real war waited. Eleanor stepped into the cold. She had work to do. The end.